Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, and thank you for being a listener. Here are your hosts, Sharon Johnson and Susan+lambert+hatem.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Susan.
Today, I'm so thankful. I'm thankful for music and friends and singing, and especially for our guest today, a woman who knows all about music and friends.
I am thankful too, because Cindy Fee is a recording artist and singer who has been performing professionally since she was 16 years old. She has sung with Kenny Rogers, Garth Brooks, Dolly Parton, Whitney Houston, and Lionel Richie, among others.
She's a prolific studio performer, jingle, and commercial singer, and she is most known for singing the incredible television theme song for the Golden Girls, Thank You for Being a Friend.
That may be one of the most, if not the most, recognizable theme songs of all time. We're so thrilled to have Cindy Fee on the show to tell us about her career and her incredible journey.
Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, Miss Cindy Fee.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We are really thrilled to talk with you today. Starting off, are you still singing and performing these days and doing your cabaret show by any chance?
Yes, I am. I started it last spring in Chicago, and we're booking dates throughout the Midwest and on both coasts.
Oh my goodness.
That's fantastic.
We will come see you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. But let's take ourselves back in time a little bit. You started performing very young professionally.
Yeah, I was actually making money performing by the time I was about 14. And but I was one of those little kids that, I sang before I talked. I was singing for my family and parents' friends by the time I was about 3, very, very age appropriate tunes like, hey, good looking, stuff that, things, of course, that your parents listen to, But I did have a wonderful musical upbringing of all kinds of music. So it kind of shows in my voice. My voice is a mix of all these different styles. And I think that's partially due to that my parents listened to everything under the planet.
And are they musically inclined too? Are they musicians?
My mother had a wonderful voice. Both of my parents are deceased, but my mother had a wonderful voice. My father had a great tone, but he couldn't hold a pitch for anything. And yet after he was told to just mouth the words, he just sang louder. So,
Good for him.
Yes, good for him is right. Because singing's a pretty wonderful experience.
So how did that look? Like, you just kept going and suddenly you were being paid to sing? Or did you make a choice?
I think it was, I had been singing all along, in various little things, even as a 5-year-old in a Beatles band, where they kicked me out because I didn't want to lip sync. I was a young kid in the Beatles band. But that was when I lived in Detroit. But I moved to Kansas City probably about 5th grade. And by 7th grade, I sang in the talent show. I sang with a group of other singers, other kids in school. And then I sang out and did a solo. I sang Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, which is I'm all things soul is kind of where my wheelhouse is. And I, from then on, I was just known as sort of the voice, the voice of my school. And I started making money singing in a guitar trio in a restaurant, the summer after 8th grade. So, and then never looked back.
And so, in your bio, it says you packed up and moved to LA at 20.
I did.
And so, what was that like? And what year are we talking about? Not those,
We're talking about around 78. And, I just remember driving across the desert in my beat up old car that didn't have air conditioning. So I drove at night with my cat and my record collection and hauling it all in the daytime. The night I spent the night, so my records didn't melt. I knew a couple of people that had moved there from the Kansas City music scene. I had started playing. I'd done a number of things. I'd been in a band that was one of the top bands in the area. By the time I was 18, too young to go into the clubs we played at. And then one year I sang jazz with a jazz trio for a year. And the man that was in the band that I was in, Hotfoot, he had moved to Los Angeles ahead of me. And so he was the one person I knew. And so, you get to a certain point and you go, do I want to be back then? Of course, today it's a different story because today you have the internet. So you can kind of, make music wherever you are. But back then you went to one of the three major centers. If you were really serious, you go as far as you can in your small pond, so to speak. And then you move to the big city. I was pretty lucky. I probably had the only job I've ever had in my life that wasn't singing for about 5 months. And then I won the best vocal performance on the American Songwriting Festival for a song that my friend had written. And that just led to all kinds of things just down the road, things, because that's the way it works. One thing leads to another and then you just kind of keep going. So
work begets work.
Yeah, kind of, The first thing I did was start singing songs for a songwriter that you might have heard of, Diane Warren.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Very young Diane Warren. She was probably just about the same age as me, very prolific. And, I sang a ton of songs for her, song demos for her at that age. So that was what got me going.
That is amazing. And did you guys just sort of click? And she's like, "Oh, I like you. You have the right voice to demo my songs." Or did you become friends?
No, I'd never met her before that. I must have had the right voice because I basically did 6 or 7 demos a week for her because, man, she was really prolific. I'm sure now she still cranks them out at an amazing rate. She's a very prolific writer, but yeah, she was great. She was wonderful to work with. She had someone that believed in her. And so, we did these song demos at Western Studio, every week.
Oh my gosh. And then when the song comes out, are you like, yeah, I did that demo?
Well, early on, there weren't that many, because like I said, she was just writing so many. By the time she actually started having hits, I had moved on to other stuff. I wasn't really doing song demos anymore.
So what is that world like in terms of getting to do demos for a songwriter? Honestly, I don't know much of anything about that world. So,
well, what that world is, and you see it in particular a lot in Nashville because there's so many songwriters in Nashville, is that there's a lot of writers that, although they're wonderful, prolific writers, they're not great singers. And so they hire someone to come in that is a good singer that can sing the song to make the song sound as good as it can be. And then the songs, through their publishers, get shopped to artists. Or in the case of Diane Warren, at this stage of the game, she probably doesn't have anybody doing it. She's just playing the song for whoever wants a song for her. But it's a good way for a lot of young singers to get started, because your voice is getting out there. You get things to put on a jingle, on a reel, so that other people can hear you, because left to your own devices, it's pretty expensive, especially back then. Nobody had home equipment to go into a studio to record.
And is the writer pretty much, are they still sometimes working on the song in terms of trying to figure out not necessarily what genre, but to figure out what the song is going to be? How much, the tempo.
No, usually the songs are done.
Okay.
Usually they have an idea because they're going to hire a voice that gives them someone like say early on, a writer wants to send a song to Celine Dion, for example. They're not going to hire someone that sounds country. They're going to hire someone that sounds somewhat in that genre. They don't want the very best vocal performance because they want the artist to be able to think about what they can add themselves. But they want someone that's a good singer that, that shows the melody, shows, the direction that they see. Now, many times people will take a song a different direction for sure, but it's mostly done, like I said, by young songwriters that are trying to break in. They can't just call up, an artist and have them pick up the phone. It's just not going to work that way.
And now, did you do any writing yourself?
I learned to write after I had a deal with RCA in Nashville when I went to Nashville, because Nashville's kind of one of those places where everyone writes. It's kind of like you just sort of plug in, and there's a million songwriters, just like there's a million players in Nashville. So yeah, I write quite a bit actually.
It's such an amazing artistry, and but singing is a mystery to me. Like, as someone who has who loves singing. Sharon's a singer, and I love singers, and I work with singers, but just the ability to make your voice do amazing things I love it. It's like acting to me. I work with actors all the time, and yet I still think it's kind of magical what they do.
Well, everyone's got their own process, and Sharon, I'm sure you agree with me, everyone, but those of us that are singers, it's just, for me anyhow, singing is even more natural than talking. I've always sung, and I sing whether I'm working or not. Some singers don't, but I do. I just kind of sing. I just go. In fact, there was one point when my kids were like, "Quit singing, Mom, you sing too much, stop. And you think life is a musical." And I said, "Well, to me it is, really."
I love that. And were your kids aware of what you're doing? Are they impressed by it? Did they go into it? Yes, no. My kids were aware because I would fly off to work, or I would work in town, and I've always done live performing at various times throughout the phase. So they weren't particularly impressed by it when I was young, when they were young, because I was mom to them, it was different, and then they got used to it. And then they were like, I'd go, "You want to go hear Sheryl Crow sing?" And they'd go, because of people I know, and they'd go, "Well, what kind of food are they having backstage?" Like really weird things. And you'd go, okay. Now that they're, they're like early 30s, they're both very impressed by it. They came to one of my shows last spring, and they were basically like, "We didn't know you were funny. We didn't know you could handle an audience like that." It's like, well, maybe if you'd come to some of my shows for the last 10 years, you would have, but that you're just mom. It's different. It's very different. It's really neat, though, to be able, as your kids age, for them to then see you. You start to see them as like people separate and apart from being your child, and then they start to see you a little bit separate and apart from being parent.
Exactly. It becomes you're always going to be their parent, and they're always going to be your kid, but they see you in a different way. And for me, it's nice because I'm very close. My husband and I are both very close with both of our kids, and and they call me a lot, more than I call them, actually. I'm not the mother that's always calling them. They call me a lot. They check in a lot. So I'm lucky.
And do they live close by, or are they far?
They both live in Chicago, so they're about 4 hours away. They live there. But I see them because I go to Chicago fairly frequently for things. So I see them when I'm in town.
And so you, what got you doing the studio work, right? It seems like that's where you sort of landed.
Well, right after I moved to Los Angeles, first of all, I started doing those demos for Diane Warren. And that led me to one day I was in a studio with her, and she said, "Have you ever done jingles?" And I said, "Well, I would like to, but nobody's paying any attention to my jingle reel." I'd sent it out. And she said, "Well, there's a jingle writer in the next studio, John Tartaglia." And she said, "Why don't you give him a tape?" So I had a reel with me because as a singer, you always have a reel just in case. And I ran in the studio and said, "Hi, I'm Cindy Fee. I'm a singer. Please listen to my reel," and then ran back out, So it was like a hit and run or something. But, and he called me a few days later and had hired me for a spot that we flew to New York to do. My first time in New York. It was pretty exciting for this pretty young kid. And he did not get the spot we sang. I think it was for a Clairol commercial. But while I was there, the producers liked my voice and flew me back the next week to sing a demo. They call them demos until they decide that's what they're going to do for the new Avon campaign. So I got that, and so then started flying back and forth between New York and LA every other week to do Avon. And that led to the LA jingle writers who, the business, everybody wants somebody that they think other people are using. They were like, "Okay, now why are we not using Cindy Fee if New York is using her?" So I started working there. And also Mike Post, the man that had, that's written a million TV themes.
We love
and
Mike Post.
Yes, and Mike recorded some sides on me to try to get me a record deal, which he did not get a record deal, but he introduced me to all of the guys from First Edition, which is how I ended up meeting Kenny Rogers and singing with them for quite a while. So I had these two kind of things going simultaneously. I was starting to do jingles and then starting to do recording projects as well with them. So it kind of, which is how it works. You take off on two different fronts sometimes.
And so late 70s, early 80s, this is happening.
Yes, by maybe 81, 82. I was really doing a lot of stuff by then because it's a whole, particularly back then when everything, there wasn't a million studios nobody had their home studios. So jingles were all being done by 5 or 6 jingle houses, same things for film or for TV shows, they were all being done by, there may be 4 or 5, 6 writers in the area. And one person would hear you, then you'd work for someone else. So it just became it was very lucrative because it was all network back then. We didn't even have cable. So it was all network spots. And so the people that you were working with really were the best of the best, people that were incredibly fast, incredibly good at their craft, because you'd have to come in and sing something and, sing a lead in a half hour, an hour, sing backgrounds in an hour. Everything would be done in one day, not like record dates where it can take weeks to get the right vocals, to get the right things. So it's so it really attracted the best of the best people, and that and the money, of course. So.
Your parents must have been really happy that things started going so well for you relatively quickly. I would imagine that they might have been a little trepidatious about you moving to Los Angeles initially.
Yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because it took me a while to finally decide that when I first got there that I needed to go get a job. There were a number of, can I have a couple $100, Dad? Phone calls home. But my parents were always, they just believed in me so totally. They were always in my corner, and they just knew, because I never went through this phase of what am I going to do when I grow up. I always knew what I was going to do. It was just who I was. And they were my biggest fans. I was lucky because, my husband, I believe his mother, he also moved to Los Angeles as a guitar player, writer, as part of a band that had a deal with Capitol. And his mother had told him, if you're going to be a musician, you're going to be a second-class citizen, which was what a lot of people in that time, period thought. And so I was lucky to have people that believed in me so totally.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now, did you guys meet in LA as a music thing?
We did, although he was by this time doing appraisal. He has a very successful appraisal review company. Because he got to a certain point, I think the biggest thing he ever did was he was Bette Midler's arranger for a while. But he kind of went, there's a million arrangers here in Hollywood. Am I that amazing that I'm going to have this amazing career? Maybe not. So I better find another thing. So I became an appraiser. And appraisal is good for musicians because it's numbers, just like music. Music is numbers. So.
That's amazing. All right. So you're working with Mike Post. Any Mike Post stories? Because I'm a huge Cannell Mike Post fan.
Well, he brought me in to see, he brought me into one of Dolly's recordings, and I got to meet Dolly Parton. Here I am, this 21-year-old kid, and I meet Dolly Parton and heard her sing in the studio. And he did a record with her during that time period, and she recorded the song, the Woody Guthrie tune, Deportee. And it stuck with me so amazingly that I've sung it as an encore for years and years. But what I loved about Dolly was in the studio, she wasn't all made up and she didn't have her wigs on. She just looked pretty normal, except for obviously how she's built, But I mean, she said, yeah, this is how I look in ordinary life, so I can go about ordinary life, back then. The other thing that was pretty great is he hired me to sing he was producing a record for an artist out of Memphis, and he hired me to sing in a big, giant background group. And so that was where I met Ken Vassy, who led me to the first edition. But I'm singing in this group of about 20 singers, and I'm pretty excited. It's one of my first LA sessions out there. And I hear this amazing voice, and I look over, and there's Linda Ronstadt, 2 singers over from me. And I'm just like, holy Jesus, I can't even believe it. It's like you're just going, this is, being thrown into it was fine for me. I was okay with it, but it was so exciting and so amazing, to hear these voices.
I mean, what an exciting time to be in music. I guess music is always exciting, but That was a really neat time to be breaking into music and
Well,
singing
it
with these
was
people.
because you didn't have, like, everybody does stuff at home now or in their producer's studio. Back then, like Mike also produced Bruce Hornsby. And now he didn't get a deal on Bruce, but Bruce went and did his own record a couple of years later and brought it into the studio at a Lion's Share at Kenny Rogers' studio and played it for us before it was ever released because I was there doing some work. And so it was exciting because it was just different. People had to get together. They had to get together. It wasn't done so separately as things are. Now, the other side of the coin in today's world is that an artist can be an artist without ever leaving their home. Like Billie Eilish, who, broke out with her and her brother doing their stuff at home, and that's a wonderful thing too. You can find your own audience in today's world, but you don't have without having to get through the gatekeepers of the major labels, which is what you had to do back then.
How old were you when you went into a studio for the first time to record?
The first time I ever sang, I was about 18. It was in a studio in Kansas City, and it was it was a studio that had been built in this big cave. It was called Cavern Studio, and I went in with a friend of mine who to this day still makes music, Gary Apple, and he had me sing. What did I sing? I sang a female version of Tom Petty's American Girl. She was an American girl, so that was pretty exciting, but I did so much recording by the time I got to LA that it just became secondhand because it was like during the height of the Jingles and session work in Los Angeles, you were working 3-4 sessions a day.
I was going to ask you, so what was a session day like for you? How many?
Usually I would have a couple of jingle sessions, and then because I was singing both lead and background, I got very successful doing lead. I was probably the top female call in town for quite a while. That means the top female solo voice. And it sort of depended who you worked for, but there was a lot of wine back in those days. I mean, it was literally like Mad Men, only, all the top jingle producers, writers would have their wine stash and all the clients would come in and they'd start drinking wine the beginning of the day, these amazing bottles of wine. So as a young singer, I learned then when you were done with your session, if it was the end of the day, you'd have a couple glasses of wine. So I'm learning to drink this amazing wine when I'm 21 and 22. But I would usually do a couple jingle sessions and then maybe a record date at the end of the singing background for different people. So it was just going from one studio to the next. I mean, you had to keep your time frame. You were booked from like 10 to 12:30, 1 to 3, and then 3:30 to whenever. So they would work around your schedule if they particularly wanted you for something, but,
So you have to walk in there and pick things. You have to immediately be able to pick up anything and sing anything anyway.
Yeah, yes. And in Jingles, back then in particular, it was all charts. They put charts in front of you. I mean, they would sometimes, if you were singing lead, sing the song for you, but it was mostly charts. Luckily, I read music, which is a good thing because, I mean, the rest of those singers I was working with, those people could read anything, and they still can. A number of them, Edie Lehman, they still work a lot today. There's a lot of people that are still around doing what they do.
So a lot of times, would you walk into the session without having the opportunity to hear or see the music ahead of time to prepare? Or
always, you never saw it. You would walk in there and you'd read through it. They'd play the track. You'd read through it. If it was a particular, if it was a song, like in the case of, which we'll get to later, I'm sure, the Golden Girls, they played me Andrew Gold's version of the track, a couple of times. But yeah, it was all, you never got anything ahead of time. Which is why I said the people were the best of the best, because they had to be willing to do that. I still recall years later doing a session for a producer in Nashville. And he said, I walked, and it was a recording session that he produced some sides on me. And he goes, you walked in, you just set your coat down, you went up to the mic, you put the headphones on, you put your water bottle, and you said, okay, I'm ready. And he goes, and that's just not what happens in records, generally speaking. But I was so used to that from Jingles, that was what I did.
So what was LA like in the early 80s?
Well, LA was really exciting in the 80s. There was a lot of money going around. There was a lot of work. There was a lot of incredible talent, I mean, from everyone from, like I said, the young people that were coming there, like Bruce Hornsby and people like that there were people that became gigantic stars that tried to break into Jingles and weren't successful, like Sheryl Crow, which is where I first met her, on a Jingle date. But it was just a very creative time and a lot of work. It was really fun, a lot of work. And it was a good time for singers because we had contracts in place. Union contracts were in place. I met this guy that had sung the theme to Gilligan's Island, but they didn't have TV contracts in place back then. So he really only made his daily players rate, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I'm glad you had contracts in place.
Yes, me as well.
All right. So Jingles. And when did you start doing theme songs? Was that just mixed in? How did that?
Yeah, that was mixed in. I had sung a number of them, but the Golden Girls was the one that was that really went. And you would do, back then, network TV, all of their fall shows, they would all be like the second week of September. They would debut all the shows. So everything would be done in the summer. I think I got the Golden Girls call probably June or July, right in there. And I went in and sang it. And I didn't really know much about the show other than I just was singing this song. I didn't find out much later. And what they would do is the networks would do a pilot, input music to it, hire everyone for a pilot, and then they would do it for an audience. And if the audience liked it, a test audience, then they would order episodes for the season. And so I must have done it early, probably June. It probably was June, because they would have then worked all summer getting the episodes ready to start. Although they kept filming week after week. So it was an interesting process. It's very different from what they do today.
Well, and so you didn't know. You just went in. It was one of the jobs. At what point did you know?
Well, after probably midway through the first season, because it was getting so much press, and it's wonderful that it was, because I mean, in today's world, would they do a show about 3 older women and their mother? No, it would never happen. And yet I think that one of the things that made me fairly early on realize that it might be a show that had some staying power was the fact that almost every episode they did things that happened to women. Like one episode, B. Arthur finds out the man she's dating is married, right? And then the Rue McClanahan is saying, "Oh, go for it. You deserve to have love." And Betty+white's going, "No, it's wrong." And I thought, this is why this show is so popular, because there is no woman on the planet, that has not found out that the person that she's dating is either engaged or involved or married. That is, now I'm sure it happens to men as well, probably not as much, particularly back then. But I mean, what they did was come up with things that are uniquely women's issues. And that was pretty brilliant. I know you had Stan on here a while back.
Yes,
right?
we did. Yes.
He's a pretty charming guy and so funny and so interesting.
Yes, he is. We had a blast. And it sort of led, I don't know if that's how Zach heard of us, but we're delighted to be in touch with you. And we it led us to moving Golden Girls up. I've been a little intimidated by Golden Girls. It's the ultimate 80s TV ladies. So I was like, well, we can't cover it near the top of our show. But then I was like, all right.
Well, yeah. Well, and of course the fact is that there aren't any more. I mean, I guess in some ways I'm the last Golden Girl.
I know.
And I am now a little bit past the age that they were when they first started doing it.
It's just so amazing because
it's disconcerting.
It's very disconcerting.
It is. It's pretty
wild. They
weren't
that old.
They don't seem that old the older we get, do they?
No, they don't. Well, we have to take a break, but we'll be right back to talk more with Cindy and play the commercial jingle game. Welcome back for more 80s TV ladies. I miss TV theme songs. I really do. There are so many over the years that I've loved, whether, it's some instrumental, but certainly the ones you sing along to, they are so ingrained in you when it comes to your thoughts and your feelings about the show. You hear the music and you're right there. You're in the living room with Blanche and Dorothy and Sophia, or sitting in the kitchen with them having cheesecake or whatever when you hear that music. And that's true with so many shows, and I miss it. I understand the reasons why. I don't like the reasons why they don't do that anymore, but as much anymore, but I really, really miss it.
Well, they are trying, and some shows are trying to bring it back. The show Outlander uses the same song to open every one of its episodes. Now, it does change the singer, I think, every season, I was told. But, I think that, I think it's interesting because when I first started doing jingles and all this kind of stuff, writers tended to look at things like, like a song for a TV show, a song for a jingle is almost like you're selling out. Until they started realizing how much money was being made.
You are. And how profitable it was to sell out.
Exactly. I mean, it got crazy. I got a call once to sing, I think it was for a Goodyear commercial. It was to sing Respect, the Aretha Franklin song Respect. And they hired me because they wanted someone soulful, but not someone that would sound black, right? They wanted to make sure, because they didn't want to get sued, by the Franklin, corporation, because everything's a corporation now. But it was pretty wild because, I'm singing it and I'm trying to take, and I do normally, I'm a soulful singer. I can sing with a lot of licks and a lot of stuff, but I just kept scaling it back and they kept going, no, it's still too soulful. And I wasn't doing any licks by then, and I go, well, what is too soulful for you? And they go, what you want, baby, I got it. I go, well, what am I supposed to sing? What do you want, baby? I have got it. It's like you're just going, did you even think about this before you picked this song? I think probably it was Northern Exposure that was the first TV show to start playing a song at the end.
I'd forgotten that they did that, and I watched that show.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Remember, that was the first time I ever saw that, and now everybody does that. On TV shows, they come up with a song, and everybody wants their songs on TV shows now, or film. Everyone wants it because, once again, when they realize the profits involved in it, that changed it. But the industry has changed so many ways.
Yeah.
And is it for the better or worse?
I think some of it is for the better, because it's not necessarily the recording industry. Songs, not so much for the artist, because unless you're someone like a Taylor Swift, or you just sell directly through your own website, you make no money. Literally, I have two or three records on all the streaming services and on Apple. You can buy it, and and I sell I sell a lot of them every year, and I probably make maybe at the most $1,500.
Oh, wow.
It's like you get nothing, basically. So that's why so many artists, they have to tour. They just go on tours because they don't have an option of making money. It's not the way it used to be. Even back then, record labels, your first deal, what was my first deal? I got 5 cents out of every record sold. So unless you had a hit, you're not making anything, so it's just different. So in the recording industry, I would say, yes, it's not nearly as good as it used to be. Also, because so much of it is done by AI, they're basically deciding, if you look at an artist and you go to, one of the streaming services, they'll put the songs that you say, okay, I want to hear a Cindy Fee playlist. The songs they put on there are ridiculous. A lot of them are like, what the heck does that have to do with anything I've written or anything I've done? Nothing. But it's what some computer generated program thought. So for music, not so much. For film and TV, I would say it's been a good thing. Look at the quality. Back in the day, no movie star would ever do a TV show.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, unless they'd gotten old, I mean, you did one or you did the other. You were very lucky if you could cross. And once you crossed over from TV to film, you usually didn't go back. But in today's world, it's different. Everybody.
And was that true in for singers? Like if you're doing commercials and television, would you get called for a film or for?
Oh yeah, it's the same singers. It's the same singers that do, unless they're hiring a celebrity, and then the celebrity is getting, they're not doing a SAG daily players rate contract. They're getting their, and even in jingles. I mean, I was very lucky because a couple of jingle campaigns that I did for long periods of time. I sang Hoover. Nobody does it like you, Hoover, nobody. I sang that for 7 years and I was under contract. And so every couple of years, I would sign a new contract, and they had to pay me a certain amount per year and I'd get a new Hoover appliance. And I just remember thinking, because the way it worked was back then as a face, if I had done a Hoover commercial, I couldn't do a Dirt Devil commercial, for example. You had to kind of stay, whatever you did in that genre. But it wasn't that way for singers, because I remember thinking, what do they think? Like Dirt Devil is like beating my door down, but okay. It's like, so it's a little different, it's a little different. No, singers do everything, from film to, in fact, there were a number of contractors, people that would hire singers, like say for a film coming out, like say the film Glory, right? They would hire, I think there was probably 120 singers singing on that film. And as a consequence, I get my little residuals every now, because apparently it's still being shown occasionally. And I'll get like it'll come through, SAG, and it'll be like a residual for 10 cents. Every singer gets those things, like a 10-cent residual,
So what's been the most unexpected, like residual that you wouldn't think of, right? I mean, we assume you're getting good Golden Girls residuals even to this day.
Oh yeah. In fact, the pandemic was huge because that's when the Hulu picked up the Golden Girls. And I think Zach told me that it streamed something like in 1 week alone on Hulu, it streamed like 2.3 million times, just 1 week. So for most people, the pandemic was financially a problem. For me, I'm going, holy cow, why have my residual checks suddenly quadrupled? And that's why, so, because streaming services picked it all up, because people wanted shows like the Golden Girls. Yes. They wanted shows that made them feel connected.
Yeah. And joyful. They wanted, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And funny.
Funny, community.
Funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that.
I just wondered if the networks had changed the contracts at some point to phase out, as new things come along, those sorts of long-term payments. Because I've got to believe.
Well, I think they tried, just like they've tried everywhere. But the fact of the matter is, the Screen Actors Guild, we have celebrities. You can't do a movie without top SAG talent. And so we have all the cards. We have basically, with the exception of a couple of strikes when we really didn't know what was going to happen with them, the strike in '88, which is when cable came in. Nobody really had any concept as to what cable would be like, and the same thing but by 2003, I think might have been another strike right after 9/11, if I remember correctly, right around. And then, there was a strike, and that was because that was when, the internet came in, streaming. And by then they realized they did not get what they really wanted with cable. All of a sudden, your song could be played a bunch of times on cable and you weren't making very much at all. But but with the internet strike, both the early 2000s and then the one we just had with basically AI was the main thing, because AI is pretty scary for a performer. I mean, they could take my voice and just copy it and use it and never pay me anything. So, I think that like I said, we're lucky because we have the top talent. You know, if it wasn't for that, they would have, they're money people. They would have done anything they could to save money, but with celebrities in our corner, it trickles down for everyone.
Yeah.
The only trickle down economics that ever worked.
Because you have a contract. Unions.
Yes. There you go. Unions, pro-union.
Because I think what most people don't understand is that the contracts are for the people at the bottom end of the food chain. Because if you're a celebrity, you have a lot more leeway to get in your contract what you want.
Exactly. And you're not signing a SAG daily players rate for $2,000 a day.
Exactly.
If you're a celebrity, that's why to this day, I'm not, even though he was one of maybe the most amazing golfer that ever lived, I'm not a Tiger Woods fan because he crossed the picket line during the strikes in the early 2000s, to do a commercial. And that was when he was in his heyday, when he was winning everything. And I thought, really? Do you really, really need this that much? But, that's just, my interpretation of it. Yeah. So
you sang a song for an episode as well. Did you go back in and do more stuff for Golden Girls?
That is not me.
That's not you.
Everyone thinks the one that you,
the one that's in Wikipedia. Yes, that's not you.
That's not me. No, that's why it's not on my wiki page, because that's not me singing that. In fact, that was a question that was asked at the Golden Girls conventions. They had the first of them a couple of years ago, and people, I did do the song in my show for that very reason, because, that was an interesting thing, because the first year I sang, I thought, okay, they want to hear me sing stuff from the Golden Girls that was on the Golden Girls show. So I did there, and there weren't really that many songs. I wasn't going to go out there and sing Turkey Lurkey, because that's not really, that's not really a song you sing. So I tried to pick a few things, that they had done. But by the second Golden Girls convention, it became clear from what people said to me that they didn't really care that I was singing the Golden Girls stuff. They wanted to know what I had been doing, which is what led to the show that I'm now doing, because the people were interested in, here you're this voice we've listened to for, almost 40 years now. And it means so much to most people, that have listened to it, people of all ages, because the first time we did the convention, I thought, what are they going to be like? All old? Are they going to be old? And they weren't. They were young people, by and large, that had watched the show with their mothers, with their grandmothers, and kept watching it because they found a sense of community and a sense of family in it. So it was pretty interesting to see that most of these people, they wanted to know what I had done. And that's what led to the show, the shows I did, and the shows I'm going to do in the future, it's basically my life in music, starting from when I was very young, what I've sung, people I've met along the way, the songs I've sung, the things that have happened to me, and people are fascinated by it. I have met a lot of very famous people. That might be part of it. But they're also just fascinated because they've known my voice for all these years, but not really knowing my background, sort of the phantom voice.
You are the phantom voice. Did you ever meet the Golden Girls?
I met Betty+white at a screening of Evergreen. Remember, she was on Evergreen for a while. She played, because I knew someone that was in the show. And so I went and watched, and I met her, and she was lovely and very nice. But I never met any of the other ones, no. Because, it's very separate. Yeah. You come in and you sing, you do, because you're a singer, Sharon, you come in and you sing, and then they put in the TV and film industry, then it gets put together. You're not like there when they're performing, they're not there when you're performing.
And did you think, when you're seeing it and you're realizing, this show may go on for a long time, did you actually think you'd be going to conventions in 2022?
No, when Zach first found me, and he tells the story that he says he stalked me to find me, because I'm kind of hard to find. I don't have nothing's published or anything. No, I had no idea. And I don't think even Zach knew what it was going to be, because he told me that when he first came up with the idea for the convention, he thought he'd put it on in someone's garage. And it ended up being at Navy Pier, one of the biggest venues in Chicago, with thousands of people coming, So, no, I really had no idea. I mean, I knew that people loved the show, because throughout the years, that is one thing, that when people say, "Oh, you're a singer, have you ever sung anything I would know?" I mean, there might be commercials that if they're old enough, they would remember, but even young people know the Golden Girls. My son, my oldest son, when he first went to college, he called me one morning and goes, "Well, thanks a lot, Mom." And I go, "Well, what do I do now?" And he goes, "I went to a party last night and some girl goes, 'Hey, there's the guy whose mom sings the Golden Girls theme.'" and he's like, and I'm going, "Well, that show is paying for your college, so, be a little more grateful, please."
That's right.
Because apparently they had viewing parties in colleges where young girls would sit or guys too, they would watch the show. So no, I had no idea what it would, and it is interesting, isn't it? Because, I'm not sure that they ever, they've had a lot of Star Trek conventions and sci-fi and things like that, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard of a family house convention, I mean, it's kind of him doing the Golden Girls convention is kind of singular. It's kind of new.
Yeah.
It's
really neat. And now that we know about it, the 80s TV ladies would be very excited to be part of the.
Oh yeah, because it was wonderful. I mean, literally, I will say this: at both conventions, I did not meet a single person that I didn't think was just lovely. I met Marcia, the producer of Golden Girls, and that's when I met Stan. And what was right after my show, I went down and they introduced themselves, and Marcia was actually in the studio when I sang the Golden Girls theme.
Oh, wow.
Oh my gosh.
Which was wild because when Zach first approached me, he goes, "Well, what do you remember about doing the song?" I said, "I remember that it was really quick. I went in there and they played me a song and I sang it 2 or 3 times, then a couple more times, and then I left." It was because you didn't know what it was. It was just I probably sang 3 different TV themes that year. So it just happened to be the one that went and became this part of history.
Yeah. At that time, there were dozens of new shows every year and a whole bunch of things that were launching, getting ready to launch that fall. And you never know, some things, most of the time it's a surprise when something's a big hit.
All right. So were you watching a lot of television at that time, or were you just too busy?
Probably not. And, would I have watched Golden Girls on my own? I'm, I was probably 26 at the time, a 26-year-old who was working all the time and living the good life, I was probably not, because back then we couldn't record anything.
Right.
You had to be sitting in front of your TV when the time, Saturday night. So probably not. I probably didn't, I didn't watch a lot of the episodes till much later on, when I had a chance to watch them. Yeah.
So you weren't sitting in front of the TV going, "Oh, I want to be that commercial. Why didn't I get that one?" Did you ever be like, "Oh, I wish I'd gotten that one"?
No, not so much, because I was really lucky. I worked a lot. I was very, very lucky. And I had big campaigns that went, get on your Pontiac and ride. I did that both in Los Angeles and then later on in Chicago. They resurrected it again. Big Boys Eat. I won a Clio for that one. I sang that for, the very first person on the Wheaties box, Walter Payton, So, I was very lucky to have a lot of stuff that went for long periods of time and to work with amazing people. And I think part of that is because I never really approached it like a jingle singer. I just sing, from the time I've been a little kid, I just sort of sing. I just open my mouth and let it comes out the way it comes out. I would never be able to sing a sound alike. I'm not good at that kind of stuff. I'm just really only good at doing me. So.
Do you remember the first time you heard or were watching the Golden Girls and heard yourself singing the song?
I do. I'm sure I watched it about mid-season. I can't tell you what episode it was, but it was like, and I may have watched the original one because that was pretty exciting to be on a theme, a theme song. I had already had sung a couple of movie stuff. I had sung a movie called Lefty about a one-armed gymnast. And I remember, and I watched Lefty because I had a girlfriend, a very close girlfriend, who was an artist that was born with one arm. And so that really meant something to me to do that. But yeah, I do, to hear your voice on TV is pretty fun.
Yeah.
To hear your voice on commercials or on TV. Although remember that back then, the distinction between SAG and AFTRA back in the day was that all TV shows that were, any TV show that was filmed was SAG. Anything that was videotaped was AFTRA, American Federation of TV and Recording Artists. And almost all shows on TV were AFTRA. That almost everything was videotaped back then.
Sitcoms.
Movies were what was filmed. Yeah, all the sitcoms were AFTRA, right?
And but commercials were filmed.
Commercials were filmed except for radio commercials.
Yeah.
So you would get say if one of the commercials, say Hoover is running on radio, then I would get a check from AFTRA for that. And if it was on TV, I would get a Screen Actors Guild. So. Because back then the unions were separate; they were different. I mean, we merged about 5 years ago. But
all right, so if we should do a commercial TV jingle game, if you're up for it, because you clearly remember your commercials. Which is, I'm going to shout out one of the jingles, and you can tell us a one-line memory or favorite line or a person you worked with from that commercial, or you could just sing a line, because you can get away with anything if you're singing it here.
That's true.
Okay.
Actually, I can get away singing any of them anywhere. People go nuts.
All right. What the big boys eat.
That was for Ron Hicklin, and it was so exciting because, like I said, it was a cereal box. The first time, and I sang it to a bass, just a bass recording. It was like boom, 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 boom. Come on in, take a seat. We're gonna tell you what the big boys eat. So that was really fun. Although it's very hard as a singer to sing to a bass just alone is pretty hard, but that was an exciting commercial. Yes. And like I said, it won a bunch of Clios. So that was really a good commercial.
Now, do you get a Clio when you win a Clio? I've won a Clio.
No, I don't. It's just the person that writes it.
Oh, yeah. I won a
That's
Clio.
Awesome.
I won a Clio at Disney for some marketing because I worked in marketing for a while. But
what did you win your Clio for?
It was for the website for the Royal Tenenbaums, and it was the second year they gave Clios for websites. And Disney got the Clio.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I
didn't get to take the Clio home.
So no, I didn't. I just, it was, the person that wrote it got the Clio. So,
well, you get the check mark. But now, is there
but that's okay because I got the money. So.
There you go.
And the notoriety,
Now, was there a female version of What the Big Boys Eat for Mary Lou Retton? Was it a different version of the song, or was it the same song?
Yes, I sang all of those. I didn't, if you remember the commercial, you don't really say the person's name. What I would do is do a voiceover in between, like, "Hey, sweetness," for Walter Payton, or you'd say a little clip in the middle of it, a voiceover, but the song itself didn't actually mention the athletes. So they used the same song over and over.
Okay.
I did record different versions of it at various times, but which is unusual because you don't usually do that. Usually they just use, you'll do like a long, like Pontiac. We did almost like a 3-minute version of it. I sang that with a wonderful singer, Mark Campbell, an amazing singer. He and I did a ton of duets at the time. He had that big, crunchy, wonderful, big, growly voice, and so we did like a 3-minute version of it for Lanny Music, Mark Viejo, who was just wonderful. So it was, it was a pretty great thing to do.
Get on your Pontiac and ride.
Lanny Music, there were a number of really great music houses, but Lanny was the more cutting edge one, so it was a great place to work for, and there were a lot of people that went on to become recording artists that went through that particular one. I worked with the two people that compromised Boy Meets Girl, do you remember?
Yeah.
Waiting on a Star to Fall. That was their big hit. Richard Marx. There were a bunch of people that came through.
Oh, cool.
Jingles.
That's cool. All right. So Jingle, Nobody Does It Like You. What do you remember about that?
Well, the best story is that I was at a session in Chicago. I'm in a session and some girl goes, "Man, I wish I could do a jingle like that girl that does that song. Nobody does it like you. She must be making a fortune." And everybody kind of looked at me and I'm going, okay. But the other thing was, this showed me how much money corporations had. I got hired to come sing it as the surprise guest at the Hoover Convention in Florida. And so I was a surprise guest, so nobody really knew I was there. And so they flew my husband and I down there, and we had this amazing bungalow on the beach. And all I had to do was sing the song for, at the very end, 60 seconds of the song. And they paid me just a fortune. And then the day before I sang, they said, "A few of us are staying on for another week or so if you want to stay." So we quickly called our babysitter, because that was in the corporate heyday of so much money. And it was like, it didn't even mean any. That's why in today's world where, there's such inequity in what people get paid. I mean, it's kind of always been that way at the top of corporations. These people just had so much money that it didn't matter to them. I was in a bungalow on the beach, and this was, I don't know, 25, 27 years ago, that probably cost $2,000 a night. And they just said, "Stay another week. We don't care." So, but I love singing that commercial, because even though it was kind of odd, because it's like, here it is, like a love song to a vacuum, right?
Yes. Would you have any advice for singers that wanted to make a living with music now?
I would say, find your own voice. Try not to be, yes, listen to everybody you can listen to, but find out what truly makes you special. What gives you the most pleasure when you're singing? What do you like about what you do? What do you like the most in music? Don't try to be someone else, because that was certainly something that was done back in the day of the big labels. They'd when lawyers got involved, they'd sign a Madonna, then everybody would be looking for someone who was like Madonna, as opposed to, a singular voice. I think it's a little easier now because you can make your own videos, put them out there, on TikTok, put them out there on your web pages, make your own, make music. I do think that part of what is harder for artists today is that because of that, they didn't come up singing 6 nights a week like I did. Where you're singing, I sang in this kind of band, I sang in that kind of band, I did a jazz trio for a while. You find what you like best and what works best for you when you're performing, when you see what what you love, what people respond to. In today's world, I mean, so many of these artists, they have never sung in front of a live audience until they have a hit. And also I would say to people, even though we live in a TikTok nation, we live in sound bites. I was at a football game in Atlanta a few years ago, and they had this young girl who'd won one of the talent shows, or was on one of the big talent shows. And she came out there at halftime to sing. Instead of doing one song where she could actually, a song is like a play. It has a rising action. It has a climax. It has a falling action. And as a singer, that's what you're going through. You're building to something, But instead of doing one song, she sang bits of 5 different tunes in her 3-minute segment. And it never got to a point where you emotionally felt anything. It was all just kind of licks. It was just all her like trying to sing as best she could sing for, over and over different things. And it lost that feeling of emotion, because truly what makes someone respond to an artist, whether it's an Adele, whether it's a Taylor Swift, is the emotion they're feeling through that song. What they themselves, it's like looking at a piece of art. You may not feel exactly what the artist felt, but you're feeling something. It makes you respond to it. And that's what true original art does. So I would tell people, try to find your own voice and try to think less in sound bites.
I think that's great advice. I love that. Do you remember? Let's talk about thank you for being a friend. Why does that song resonate so much? Why do you think?
Well, I think it's because friends are the family we choose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why I think the Golden Girls is so popular because, families, we love our families. I love everyone in my family, but families are complicated. When you find a friend everyone has that meeting where you meet someone and you go, oh my God, it seems like I've known you forever. And it always is that way the rest of your life. My best friend, I've been best friends with her since I was 13. We met in a babysitting class, and to this day, she is the person I will turn to, if I ever need someone. So, I think that the Golden Girls resonated in that way. It was becoming a family with people that you weren't necessarily related to, and I think that's the biggest thing right there. Zach says it's because, funny never dies. And he's right about that. The Golden Girls are extraordinarily funny. Every one of them were so talented. It was so well written. But I think it's more about family. And I think that's why it did so well in the pandemic, because people, we couldn't be near our family, And I will say this, during the pandemic, one of the most beautiful times I ever sang the Golden Girls theme was I got a Facebook message from a friend of mine who said that one of her friends, her girlfriend, was an emergency room doc and was working full time all the time. And she was getting ready to have a big birthday. And this was early in the pandemic. Would I come on to the big birthday Zoom and sing for her? And I said, absolutely. Sure, I'll do that. And it was interesting because, it was one of those where they had, everybody had their little square, new version of the Hollywood squares. Everyone had their little square. And all of a sudden I come on and I'm like the only white face in the bottom of the screen, and I'm down there, and eventually people are starting to go, who's that girl down there? Because they didn't know me. Who's that girl down there? Who is that? And so that was when the host said, we have a special thing. And so I said, hi, I'm Cindy Fee. And I want to thank you so much for being such a friend to the world, for what you're doing. You're out there on the front lines helping all of us every day. And I sang the song to her. And by the time I was done, everyone was crying. And after I got off the call, I thought, that may be the most favorite time I have ever sung that song, because it meant so much to all these people. And I thought, for me, what was it? It was 2 minutes of my time. And it's not like we all didn't have lots of time during the pandemic anyhow, but it meant so much to these people that that was when it truly hit me how much the Golden Girls meant to people.
Yeah. And that song, both because it was on the Golden Girls, but the song itself is just incredible. It's a song that makes you feel happy.
Yeah, it is. It is a song that makes you feel happy. And I know that for Andrew Gold, it was a bittersweet thing, because here's his song being played, but he's an artist. It's not him singing it. And, it's associated with the show. But I mean, for all purposes, he is a part of pop culture for writing that song, as I am for singing it. And that's not a small thing, because to this day, like I said, people still respond to that. And that's something really special. I mean, like I said, I can name commercials and many people know them, but the Golden Girls theme, everyone knows.
Yeah.
I have never once said to someone, when they asked me what I sang, I sang "Thank You for Being a Friend" from the Golden Girls. I even used it to get a dog during the pandemic, because nobody was paying attention when I would try to email about an animal. And one day I woke up and I saw this picture and I went, that dog is supposed to be my dog. I know it. So I sent him an email and I thought, what can I do to be special? And I said, I want to thank you for being a friend to animals. And by the way, I sang the song, "Thank You for Being a Friend." And they called me immediately. And so I kind of thought, well, I don't use it very often, but I used it when I needed to. That was my ace in the hole. So,
That was for a good cause, too.
Absolutely.
It was a good cause, and I love this dog so much to this day.
We got COVID kittens, and everybody was getting their COVID animals because we needed love and support, and we wanted to love and support things.
Exactly, because did we even know when it was going to open up, the whole world was traumatized. And, we were all collectively traumatized, and animals at least gave us, some feeling of normalcy and love.
Yeah.
So.
Did you ever meet Andrew Gold?
I didn't, because we were kind of in different circles. He was part of the LA songwriting scene and the artist scene, and since I'd never had big hit records of my own, I sang on one of Kenny Rogers' records with him. I sang a duet with him, but since I had not, my recording deals had not worked out, I was in kind of a different musical circuit. Although I did have many friends who were in that circuit. Rosemary Butler is a singer that she sang on Jackson Browne's the "Oh, Won't You Stay," and she sang with everybody. And so there were some people that crossed back and forth, but not me as much. So,
who are some of the top people that you really enjoyed working with over the years, like Dolly Parton?
Dolly was amazing. I loved working with Lionel Richie. He produced a number of Kenny's records when I was singing with Kenny. And what was amazing about Lionel is that he was so secure in his musical talent that he didn't care who came up with an idea. It could be the guy sweeping the floor out back. He was just Mr. Music. Kenny was great. Kenny was very interesting. He was a star, at that time, a big star. And he kind of lived the life of a big star, but I'd have to say probably the most starstruck I ever was with someone that you wouldn't even probably know, a guy named Ken Vassy, who was in the second edition of the first edition. And Ken was the most soulful singer I have ever heard in my life. He sang with Frank Zappa. He sang with all these people, and just, for me, it wasn't really the celebrities as much. I sang with Bill Medley of the Medley Brothers. He was great. I sang on a bunch of Whitney Houston records, and that was great to sing, but she was never there. I never saw her, so I never met her. So, and that happened a lot, where you would go in to sing and the artist wasn't there.
Yeah.
So here's a great story that I sang with Kenny. He wanted Barbra Streisand to do a duet with him. So I sang the Barbra Streisand part, and it was a good song, and I sang it pretty well. And she turned down the song and said, "Never send me anything with that girl singing on it again." So I took that as a compliment. I thought, okay, absolutely, I think that's a compliment.
Yes. You made Barbra Streisand feel like she couldn't sing it.
Just different, different. Although Barbra Streisand was certainly one of the singular voices in music, period, so, but once again, it just comes back to the idea that to young singers, be yourself. You're never going to sing a Streisand song better than Streisand. You're not going to sing an Adele song better than Adele. It's not about the licks you do. It's about the emotion that comes through what you do, whether you're acting or whether you're singing. It's emotion, because that's what holds people to you. That's my advice.
That's pretty good advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
you. Don't let other people's perception of what you might not be everyone's cup of tea, but you're going to be many people's cup of tea. You're not everyone's going to love what you do, but the right people will. And that's what I always carried through with me when I went on big sessions, like when I sang on that session with Linda Ronstadt. It's like, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm just going to do what I do. Just take a deep breath and just do what you do, because what else can you do? I don't like the shows so much, The Voice and shows like that, because I think we're all apples and oranges and pears and persimmons, and everyone's so different. And how can you say this person's better than that person? I think I would tell young singers to mostly not pay that much attention to those kind of shows, to just go out and be who you are. Just try to sing live. Try to find go sing with someone, even if you're not making much money, just to get a chance to go out there and sing. And, there's something about singing a lot. Sing as much as you can. The voice is a muscle. The more you sing, the stronger it gets. Like anything else, if you don't lift weights, if you're not singing, you can't expect to go out there and just sing as great as you can. You have to exercise it.
Do you teach? Are you a teacher? You teach music?
No, I don't really like to teach.
Okay.
I have taught classes like at universities on jingles.
You have good advice and you're very inspiring. So, well, you can just talk about that in your show, I guess.
Well, I'm opinionated. I am that. I'm opinionated. And I know what has worked for me. That's all I can tell people to do, to try to find yourself. That's the most important thing. Don't be anybody else.
All right. Well, what's up next for you? Where can people find you? Is there going to be another Golden Girls Con?
I'm not sure about the Golden Girls convention because I don't think Zach wants to do it anymore. It's possible it will be. If it is, it probably will be taken over by Disney because he's pretty much staying on as my manager now. We're booking things for the winter in different cities across the country. Getting my website together so that I can actually talk to people in that particular way. I'm an actress. There may be some acting roles here in the future coming up with things like that. It's kind of like, this whole thing was sort of like like another act. Mm-hmm. You get to a certain age and you go, okay, I can still sing. I can still do what I do. What's my next act going to be? Is there going to be another act? There's a particularly gifted musician in Los Angeles that I've known for many years. I'd like to do a duets album with. I'm not interested in going out there and doing a 60-date tour at my age, but I am interested in getting out there and talking to people and singing for people because I still do what I do. I still am who I am. So
I'm thrilled that you guys reached out, and I'm thrilled that we got you on the show, and you're going to be part of our Golden Girls series of episodes. It's very exciting.
That's wonderful. And I love what you guys do. I've looked at a few of your shows. I think what you guys do is wonderful because there will never be another decade in the entertainment industry like the 80s in terms of what was done on TV and how much it means to people. In my show, since everyone, of course, is waiting for me to sing the Golden Girls theme, yes, which I do at a certain point. At one point, I act like I'm going to sing it, and then I sing a couple of other theme songs, bits from other theme songs, just to sort of build up. But what I'd like to say to you guys is, thank you for being a friend. Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant. And if you threw a party, invited everyone you knew, you would see the biggest gift would be from me. And the card attached would say, thank you for being a friend.
You're going to make me cry. Oh my gosh. Thank you. That is so amazing. So amazing.
You,
oh my gosh.
Thank you. That was just too special.
Thank you so much for everything, and keep doing what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
You guys are winning all these awards. You guys are you're tearing it up.
We've had a good year. We're really blessed. So
thanks so much. We'll see you again.
We'll see you. Here at 80s TV Ladies, how much we love to shout out the amazing ladies of the 20th and 21st century. And we love podcasts who shout out amazing ladies of any time. So we want to tell you about the Art News podcast. Every episode, they focus on telling the stories of the women pictured in the most famous works of art through history.
What an incredible idea for a podcast. Please check out Art News podcast and hear host Grace Anna, who aims to reinterpret works of art by bringing the stories of the women in those paintings to life. Who are these women and what are their stories? You can find out at artmusepodcast.com. In today's audiography, you can find out more about Cindy Fee at her Instagram, instagram.com/thankyouforbeingafan. And there will be links in our description to some of her commercials and other work.
Here at 80s TV Ladies, how much we love to shout out the amazing ladies of the 20th and 21st century. And we love podcasts who shout out amazing ladies of any time. So we want to tell you about the Art News podcast. Every episode, they focus on telling the stories of the women pictured in the most famous works of art through history.
What an incredible idea for a podcast. Please check out Art Muse Podcast and hear host Grace Anna, who aims to reinterpret works of art by bringing the stories of the women in those paintings to life. Who are these women and what are their stories? You can find out at artmusepodcast.com. We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.